Welcome back, everyone. Today we're doing a deep dive into Start With Why by Simon Sinek.
Yeah, this book, it really digs into what makes those truly inspiring leaders and companies tick.
Right, like what gives them that almost magnetic pull.
Exactly. And the big idea is that it's not just about what they do, but why they do it.
Okay, that makes sense. But can you give us an example, something that illustrates that idea?
Sure, think about Apple. They didn't actually invent the MP3 player, right?
Right.
But they totally changed how we listen to music with the iPod.
Yeah, the iPod was huge, GE.
And Sinek argues that it was all about their WHY.
Okay, so what was Apple's why?
Their message was think different. It wasn't just about a gadget. It was about challenging the way things are done, about creativity and innovation.
So they tapped into something deeper than just the product itself.
Exactly. People bought into that feeling, that idea, and
Yeah.
that's what made them so successful.
Okay, so this WHY, it's pretty powerful stuff.
And to really understand it, we got to look at Sinek's Golden Circle. It's a model, basically, that explains how inspiring leaders and companies communicate.
Oh, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this golden circle.
So picture 3 rings. The WHY is the innermost ring, the core. Then comes HLW, and the outermost ring is what?
Okay, I'm visualizing it. So the WHY is like the foundation.
Exactly. It's the purpose, the belief, the driving force. The HLW is all about the actions they take to bring that WHY to life. And the what is the tangible result, the product or service you see.
So a lot of companies, they focus on the what first, right?
Yeah, they lead with what they do, but they don't always explain WHY they do it. Truly inspiring companies, they do it the other way around.
Okay, that's interesting. Can you give us an example of a company that starts with WHY?
Take Southwest Airlines. They're famous for low fares, but that's not their core WHY.
So what is it about for them?
Their WHY is about taking care of their employees. They put their people first. And that creates this positive culture that customers pick up on.
Makes sense. Happy employees, happy customers.
It's a great example of how a strong WHY can drive both employee satisfaction and customer loyalty.
So we've got this WHY, but what about all the other ways companies try to get us to buy stuff?
You mean like all the flashy ads and limited time offers?
Exactly. Where do those fit in?
Well, Sinek calls those manipulations. They might work in the short term to boost sales, but they don't build that lasting trust.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Like those toothpaste commercials with a million different varieties. Whitening, sensitivity, gum health.
Right. It's overwhelming.
Totally. I usually just grab whatever's on sale because I can't figure it all out.
And that's exactly what they're hoping for. They're trying to make you buy based on a deal, not because you genuinely connect with the product.
So true inspiration, it comes from connecting on that WHY level.
Exactly. Where your WHY and the company's WHY align.
Okay, so we've got this compelling WHY, but how does it actually affect us? Like, what's going on in our brains when we get drawn to a product or a leader?
Well, our decisions are heavily influenced by our emotions, right? And the part of the brain that handles those emotions, the limbic brain, it doesn't actually process language.
Wait, really?
Yeah. So sometimes you just know you want something, even if you can't explain why.
Oh, that happens to me all the time.
Right. That's your limbic brain taking over.
Uh-huh.
And that is why communicating the WHY is so powerful. It goes straight to that emotional part of your brain, cutting through all the logical noise.
Like those old Apple ads. Think different. They didn't focus on the technical specs, they focused on the feeling.
Perfect example. They were tapping into a desire, an aspiration.
Okay, so let's say a company knows its WHY and can communicate it effectively. How do they reach people on a larger scale?
Well, it's about understanding how ideas spread. There's this concept called the law of diffusion of innovations.
I've heard of that. It's about how new ideas get adopted, really.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it doesn't just happen randomly. There are certain groups of people who play key roles. You've got the innovators, those folks who are always the first to try something new. They're like the pioneers.
The risk takers.
Yeah. Then you've got the early adopters. These are the people who are influential. They're open to new ideas.
So they kind of set the trends.
Exactly. And then there's the early majority, the folks who are a bit more cautious. They need to see some proof before they jump on board.
They want to know it actually works.
Right. And finally, you have the late majority and the laggards, those who are most resistant to change.
Okay, so to really get an idea to take off, you need to reach those early adopters.
It's crucial. Think about TiVo, for example. Remember TiVo?
Oh, yeah, the DVR thing.
Exactly. They had a great product. It changed how people watch TV.
It was pretty cool, but it never really became mainstream, did it?
Nope. And Sinek says it's because they didn't communicate their WHY effectively. They focused too much on the features, the what it did, instead of why people needed it.
They didn't connect with those early adopters.
Right, they didn't give them a reason to believe.
Interesting. So it's not enough to just have a good product?
Nope. You got to have a strong WHY. Think about Martin Luther King Jr. He inspired a movement because he was so clear about his WHY.
His dream of equality.
Exactly. And people who believed in that dream, they became megaphones for his message.
Powerful stuff. So leaders become these megaphones for their WHY. But how does this apply to, like, everyday people?
Well, it applies to all of us. If you know your WHY, it guides your decisions. Think about your career choices.
It can help you figure out what path to take.
Exactly. Even if it seems a little unconventional, knowing your WHY keeps you grounded.
So what about when things go wrong? Like within a company, can they lose sight of their WHY?
Absolutely. Sinek calls that the split. It's when a company grows and maybe starts focusing more on profits than on their original purpose.
Oh, I can see that happening. Gets too big, loses its soul.
Right. And it often leads to problems. Think about Walmart. When Sam Walton was alive, his WHY was all about taking care of people.
Employees and customers, right?
Yep. But after he passed away, things changed. They started facing all this negative press and legal issues.
Because they strayed from their WHY.
Exactly.
So is it possible to recover from that? Can a company get its WHY back?
It is possible. But it takes a leader who really embodies that WHY. Steve Jobs coming back to Apple is a great example.
Oh yeah, he brought them back to their roots.
Exactly. It's a reminder that it can be done, but it takes commitment.
Okay, that's hopeful. So we've talked about big companies, but what about smaller organizations? Or even just individuals?
The Golden Circle applies to all of them. Think about Ron Bruder and the Education for Employment Foundation, or EFE.
I'm not familiar with them.
So Ron Bruder is this successful entrepreneur. But his WHY goes beyond just making money. He wants to show people that they have choices, that they can create their own paths.
That's all.
Yeah, and EFE, they help young adults in the Middle East and North Africa find jobs and build careers.
So it's about empowering people.
Exactly. It's not just about giving them jobs, it's about giving them hope.
That's a great example of how the Golden Circle can work at any scale. So we've talked about communicating the WHY, but what role do things like logos and taglines play in all of this?
Oh, they can be powerful, especially if they embody a WHY that resonates with people. Think about Harley Davidson.
People get that logo tattooed.
Right. It's more than just a motorcycle. It's a symbol of freedom and community.
It's a statement.
Exactly. But for companies that don't have that kind of instantly recognizable WHY, it's about being consistent. Every decision, every message, it all has to reflect that WHY.
It's about walking the walk.
Exactly. And people can sense that authenticity. You were talking about companies losing their WHY, but what about individuals?
Yeah, can we experience that split too?
Absolutely. It's that feeling of being disconnected from what truly matters to you.
Like being stuck in a job that doesn't feel fulfilling.
Exactly. You feel lost, burned out.
So how do we avoid that? Or how do we get back on track if we're already feeling that split?
It starts with introspection. Ask yourself, what are you really passionate about? What brings you joy?
Those things you do even if you weren't getting paid.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to explore. Try new things. Your WHY might not be something you discover overnight. It's a journey.
So once you find it, then what? How do you live a life that's aligned with your WHY?
Make choices that reflect your values. Pursue goals that feel meaningful. Surround yourself with people who inspire you.
It's about creating a life that feels authentic.
Exactly. And that's where the magic happens. When you're living in alignment with your WHY, you'll find a passion you didn't even know you had.
And that passion can inspire others.
Exactly.
Okay, this has been incredible. We've talked about this WHY on so many levels. But we've been teasing the celery test, and I think it's time to dive into that. So the celery test, it sounds kind of simple, but I bet there's more to it than just choosing healthy snacks.
Yeah, it's not about making the right decision objectively. It's about making sure your choices match up with your WYY, even when there are tempting options that don't really fit. Sinek uses this example of Volkswagen launching that luxury car, the Phaeton.
The Phaeton. Yeah, I kind of remember that. It didn't really do that well, did it?
Nope, it was a total flop, even though it was a good car.
Why didn't it work? I mean, people usually loved luxury cars.
Because it failed the celery test. Volkswagen's WHY has always been about being the people's car. Affordable, reliable. A super expensive luxury car just didn't fit that image,
It's like trying to sell steak to a vegetarian.
Exactly. It might be a great steak, but it's totally missing the point. The celery test helps us stay true to ourselves, even when we're tempted by things that look good on the surface.
So it's a tool for being self-aware, making sure we're not going off track. But what about when we DO make choices that don't line up with our WHY? Does that mean we've messed up?
Yeah, not at all. We all make mistakes. We all have times where we get a little sidetracked. The important thing is to recognize it, learn from it, and get back on course.
So a lot about being perfect, it's about course correction.
Right, and that's why knowing your WHY is so important. It's like that internal compass that guides you back, even when you've taken a detour.
I love that analogy. Okay, so let's say someone's listening to this and they're thinking, all right, I want to figure out male Y, WHY. Where do they even start?
Start by asking yourself some tough questions. What are you passionate about? What are your values? What would you be doing even if you weren't getting paid?
So it's about looking inward, figuring out what really motivates you, what brings you joy.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to explore, to try new things. See what energizes you. You might not find your WHY overnight. It's a process.
And once you find it, what then? How do you actually live a life that's aligned with your WHY?
It's about making choices that reflect those values, going after goals that have meaning for you, surrounding yourself with people who get you, who share your beliefs.
Creating a life that feels authentic.
Exactly. And when you do that, you'll find a level of passion and energy you might not have even known was possible.
And that can inspire others.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been a fantastic deep dive. We've explored the power of starting with WHY from these huge companies all the way down to our own personal journeys. I'm feeling really inspired to take a look at my own WHY and see how I can use these ideas in my life.
And remember, it's not a one-time thing. Keep asking yourself those WHY questions, stay curious, and keep exploring what really matters to you.
Such great advice. To all our listeners out there, we encourage you to check out Start With Why by Simon Sinek. It's a book that can change your perspective on a lot of things. And until next time, keep diving deep.